All right. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 13, Soil and its Uses. We'll cover the study of soil as a science, geological processes, soil and land, soil formation, and properties of soil. Soil profile, soil erosion, soil conservation practices, conventional versus conservation tillage, and protecting soil on non-farmland. Soil science is the study of soil as a natural resource on the surface of the earth, including soil formation, classification, and mapping, physical, chemical, biological, and fertility properties of soil, and these properties in relation to the use and management of soils. Well, you all remember the structure of the earth. We have an inner core at the very center, an outer core, this very thick layer of mantle, and then the crust is this itty bitty little bit that we live on the very outer edge, right? And if we were to zoom in on the crust, there's oceanic crust under the water, or continental crust, which can be thicker. There's the outermost mantle, the asthenosphere, and the mantle continues downward, right? And you've also heard of tectonic plates. These are kind of like a mosaic of pieces of Earth's crust that fit together like a puzzle to cover the surface of the Earth. But they're kind of floating. So they do move very slowly. Sometimes they meet together and cause mountain ranges to be formed. Sometimes we meet in places where volcanic activity happens. That's where you see here these red parts. All right, so the crust of the earth is an extremely thin, less dense solid covering the mantle. The mantle makes up the majority of the earth and surrounds a small core of iron. The outermost portion of the mantle is solid, and the crust and solid outer mantle are collectively known as the lithosphere. The asthenosphere is a thin layer below the outer mantle, capable of plastic flow. And when I say plastic here, I'm not talking about the stuff that Ziploc bags are made of. Plastic here means that it can change. So it's capable of changing flow. Plate tectonics is the concept that the outer surface of the earth is made of large plates of crust and outer mantle that are slowly moving over the surface of the liquid outer mantle. Heat from the earth causes the slow movement, and the plates are pulling apart in some areas and colliding in others. These building processes are counteracted by processes tending to make elevated surfaces lower. Chemical weathering involves chemical alteration of rock in such a manner that it's more likely to fragment or be dissolved. Rock fragments exposed to the atmosphere may oxidize or hydrolyze, and the process of loosening and redistributing particles is called erosion. So it may happen by freezing and thawing, as we see here. And this is an eroded landscape. I believe this one's caused by the movement of a river. Weathering processes are important by reducing the size of the particles that can then be dislodged by moving water and air. Mechanical weathering results from forces that reduce the rock size of particles, the size of rock particles, without changing the chemical nature of the rock. Freezing and thawing are the actions of plants and animals. All right, moving on to soil and land. Land is the portion of world not covered by water. Soil is the mixture of minerals, organic materials, living organisms, air, and water that together support growth of plant life. So good agricultural soil is 45% minerals, 25% air, 25% water, and only 5% organic matter. Soil forming factors include parent material, climate, biological factors, and topography. Soil formation begins with fragmentation of parent material. Parent material consists of ancient layers of rock or more recent deposits from lava flows or glacial activity. The first organisms to gain a foothold in a modified parent material also contribute to soil formation. These would be things like succession, right? So depending on if it's like a glacier has scraped off the surface and we're just down to bedrock, that would be primary succession, right? All right. So lichens from pioneer communities and decomposition of dead lichens further alters the underlying rock. Humus is the organic material resulting from the decay of plant and animal remains. It mixes with top layers of mineral particles and supplies needed nutrients to plant. It creates a crumbly soil that allows adequate water absorption and drainage. So I think of humus as being like the layer of old dead leaves and pine needles on the floor of a forest. Burrowing animals such as earthworms bring up nutrients from deeper soil layers, improving soil fertility. Soil texture is determined by the size of the mineral particles within the soil. Too many large particles, like sand and gravel, lead to extreme leaching, and too many small particles, like clay, lead to poor drainage. Soil structure refers to the way and various soil particles clump together. An ideal soil for agricultural use is loam, which combines the good aeration and drainage properties of large particles with the nutrient retention and water holding ability of clay. In good soil, 1/2 to 2/3 of spaces contain air after excess water has drained. And a good soil is friable, which means that it crumbles easily. Protozoa, nematodes, earthworms, insects, algae, bacteria, and fungi are typical inhabitants of soil. All right. You guys are perfectly capable of looking at these diagrams, so I'll let you do those on your own time. Soil profile is a series of horizontal layers of different chemical composition, physical properties, particle size, and amount of organic matter. Each recognizable layer is known as a horizon. Here we see several horizons. So at the top horizon is where most of the biological activity is going to happen. Over 15,000 separate soil types have been classified in North America, and most cultivated land can be classified as either grassland or forest soil. Grassland soils usually have a deep topsoil layer. A lack of leaching results in a thin layer of subsoil. In forest soils, which are typically high rainfall areas, the topsoil layer is relatively thin, but topsoil leachate forms a subsoil that supports substantial root growth. So the O horizon is made up of litter, undecomposed or partially decomposed organic material. O for organic. A horizon is the topsoil, or the uppermost layer. It contains most of the soil nutrients and living organisms. The E horizon is formed from leaching darker materials. It's usually very nutrient poor. And B horizon is the subsoil. It contains less organic matter and fewer organisms, but accumulates nutrients leached from topsoil. It's poorly developed in dry areas. Sea horizon is weathered and a weak parent material. Sea horizon is weathered parent material, and the R horizon is bedrock. Two features of tropical rainforests that have great influence over the soil nature there are high temperatures lead to rapid decomposition of organic matter with very little litter building up, and high rainfall leads to excessive leaching of nutrients. Erosion is the wearing away and transportation of soil by wind, water, or ice. Worldwide, erosion removes 25.4 billion metric tons of soil worldwide each year. It's made worse by deforestation and desertification. And poor agricultural practices increase the erosion and lead to the transport of associated fertilizers and pesticides. Most current agricultural practices lose soil faster than it can be replenished. Wind erosion may not be as evident as water erosion, but it's still serious. And it is most common in dry, treeless areas. The Great Plains of North America have had 4 serious bouts of wind erosion since European settlement in the 1800s. When that topsoil is lost or blown away, fertility is reduced or destroyed. Thus, fertilizers must be used to restore fertility. This practice raises food costs and increases sediment load in waterways. More than 20% of U.S. land is suitable for agriculture, but only 2% does not require some form of soil conservation practice. So worldwide agricultural potential is 11% of land surface is suitable for crops, an additional 24% for permanent pasture. And on the African continent, only 6% of the land is suitable for crops, and 29% can be used for pasture. Here's some examples of some poor practices. I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. Soil quality management components. Enhance organic matter. Avoid excessive tillage. Manage pests and nutrients efficiently. Prevent soil compaction. Keep the ground covered. Diversifying cropping systems. Contour farming is tilling at right angles to the slope of the land. Each ridge acts as a small dam. It's useful on gentle slopes. One of the simplest methods for preventing soil erosion. Terracing is the practice of constructing levels at right angles to the slope to retain water. It's good for very steep land. Waterways and windbreaks. So waterways are depressions in sloping land where water collects and flows off the land. It channels the movement of water. Windbreaks are plantings of trees or other plants that protect bare soil from the full force of the wind. Windbreaks reduce wind velocity, decreasing the amount of soil that can be carried. Conventional versus conservation tillage. Plowing has multiple desirable effects. Weeds and weed seeds are buried. Crop residue is turned under, where it will contribute to soil structure. Leached nutrients are brought to the surface, and cooler, darker soil is brought to the top and warmed. Each trip over the field is an added expense to the farmer, and at the same time increases the amount of time the soil is open to erosion by wind and water. Reduced tillage is a practice that uses less cultivation to control weeds and prepare soil, but generally leaves 15 to 30% of the soil coverage of the soil surface covered with crop residue after planting. Conservation tillage further reduces the amount of soil disturbance and leaves 30% or more of the soil surface covered with crop residue. Mulch tillage is tilling the entire surface just prior to planting. Strip tillage, tilling narrow strips that will receive seeds. Ridge tillage leaves ridges and the top planted with residue left between ridges. And no-till farming involves special planters that place seeds in slits cut in the soil. Positive effects of reduced tillage: wildlife, grain, and winter food and cover. Less runoff results in reduced siltation waterways. Row crops can be planted in sloped areas, and fewer trips over the field means lower fuel consumption. 2 crops may be grown on a field in areas that's been restricted to a single crop, and fewer trips over the soil means less soil compaction. Some drawbacks to conservation tillage: plant residue may delay soil warming. Crop residue reduces evaporation and upward movement of water through soil, which may retard the growth of plants. An accumulation of plant residue can harbor plant pests and diseases, requiring more insecticides and fungicides. So here's a comparison table of various tillage methods. We've got tillage method here, fuel used liters per hectare, and time involved in hours per hectare. Protecting soil on non-farmland. So by using appropriate soil conservation practices, much of the land not usable for crops can be used for grazing, wood production, wildlife production, or scenic and recreational areas. So in summary, the earth is in a constant flux. The movement of tectonic plates and the formation of the new land is worn down by erosion activity. Soil is an organized mixture of minerals, organic material, and living organisms, air and water. Organisms affect the soil by building or burrowing into and mixing in the soil, releasing nutrients and decomposing. The ability of soil to grow crops is determined by the inorganic matter, organic matter, water, and air spaces in the soil. A soil profile typically consists of an O horizon, an A horizon, E horizon, B and C horizons. Soil erosion is the removal and transportation of soil by water or wind, and proper use of conservation practices such as contour farming, strip farming, terracing, waterways, windbreak, and conservation tillage can reduce soil erosion. The land unsuitable for crops may be used for grazing, lumber, wildlife habitats, and recreation. All right, and that wraps up chapter 13. Any questions you have, please bring them to office hours or class.